Welcome everyone. We'll start at 5 past, so hopefully the wait isn't too long. I will see you all in a few minutes. Unmute myself on the Zoom. I hope Zoom people can hear me. We'll get started now. It's 5 past. So welcome everyone to Development Seminar 4. If you haven't met me before, I'm Melissa. I am the Development Officer for UOA DebSoc this year, and I am also a speaker within the Debating Society. So I'm usually around. You'll probably see me quite a bit if you do debating. So I'm very friendly, I promise. Please come and chat to me if you are interested in making friends too. So this seminar today is on responding. So it's kind of the other half of the case building seminar that we did last week. But I think responding is a really good way to understand how to interpret the cases that you build in debating, because obviously you want it to be a winning case, one that withholds all of the responses that I'm going to teach you how to do today. So hopefully this also helps you understand what works in debating, what doesn't work, what's more likely to be successful. So I'll just go through first the responsive objectives. I think it's really important to know and keep these in mind when you're walking through debating, so you have an idea of what judges are looking for and what stands and what sticks. So I think there are two types. Lots of teams, especially teams that I've seen in club nights in the weeks that I've judged, fall into the trap of just doing offensive responses. So offensive responses is not like offensive, it's offensive as in the sports way, right? So you're trying to attack the other team, you're trying to attack their arguments. So obviously you do want to defeat the opposition's points or arguments and prove why the other team's points don't work in the way that they say they will, but you always want to remember there's two sides to the debating coin. You want to defend your own case at the same time. So make sure you're also rebuilding and strengthening your own arguments at the same time as you're trying to tear down the other team's arguments. So you should be proving why your points work and how that means you win the debate. We'll walk through in more detail what that means for the rest of the rest of debating in context. So just a big note, the most important thing that I want everyone to take out of the seminar, if you take anything away at all, is that you need to keep both of these objectives in mind to be able to win debates. You can't just tear down their argument and then have nothing left of your own to stand. You've got to tear down the argument and have a good sound case standing at the end of the debate. Okay, so we'll walk through now types of responses. So I don't want anyone to be thinking about like the technical terms that might be used or what they're called. I just want you to have a little bit of an idea of the kinds of like tools in your tool basket that you can use when responding to different cases. So the first and most common type of rebuttal in debating is direct rebuttal. So you probably have already used this before, you just haven't called it anything. So this is when you identify analysis presented by the other team and disprove it. So this is the most effective offensive type of rebuttal. So how you put it in practice is firstly, you want to highlight an aspect of the other team's argument. So it could be like an assumption that they made, it could be a specific mechanism or specific reason why they gave for the argument. Or it could even be just like a link between a reason why they think that something happens and then the thing that happens. You think that that's not necessarily true or sound reasoning. So once you've highlighted a part of their case, the second thing that you want to do is use analysis to disprove it. So for example, it most commonly looks like in debating, their mechanism is not true for X number of reasons. Usually it's like a big list of number of reasons why it's not true. So after you've done that, you've lifted off the reasons, the most important thing that you want to do here is then link it back to the context of the debate. Lots of speakers will fall into the trap of just listing reasons why things are true. That is good analysis in and of itself, but you want to be, to make yourself a good speaker, you want to get to that next step where you're linking it to what it means for the rest of the debate. So an example of how you could do this is just by saying, I have just proven that their mechanism does not work, which means that their outcomes cannot happen. So because their outcomes do not happen, they don't prove any benefits. Obviously, this is just very vague and like not specific to any debate that has happened before, but that's the kinds of things that you want to be saying, linking back the reasons why mechanisms aren't true to the context of the debate so that you can make progress. So again, this is how you are improving yourselves. Even if you're not like a brand new debater, the way that you get from being a like pretty good debater to a really good debater is by linking things back to the context of the debate. The second type of rebuttal that you can use is mitigative rebuttal. So mitigating is another type of offensive response. So it reduces the impact or the significance of the opposition's arguments. So note that mitigation is not effective on its own. So this means that you should use this as a layered response or like an even if, or you should follow it immediately with some kind of cheerleading of your own points. So mitigation looks like saying things like, even if the mechanism is true. So instead of just refuting or like explaining why their points aren't true, which you would do with direct rebuttal, what you're doing with mitigative rebuttal is engaging with the fact that even if they brought like the most perfect version of their case, the most perfect version of like they've got sound reasoning for why their arguments are true, even if they are true, here's why it isn't significant for the rest of the debate. So an example of this is, even if the mechanism is true, the benefits this creates is only for a small number of people, and you want to give a reason why it's only for a small number of people. So not just being assertive with this kind of rebuttal, you're still giving reasons why, and you're not necessarily tearing down their entire point. It's a really good strategy of conclusively pointing out why their points are more relevant. So once you've done a reason why their benefits are smaller or that their point is less impactful, you want to again link it back to the context of the rest of the debate. So you would say things like, I've just proven that their benefits are small. Our benefits, however, are more significant. So judge, you should side with us because we get more significant benefits. So mitigatory rebuttal is about trying to reduce the significance or the impact of the opposition's points within a debate. Another form of rebuttal that you can do is called weighing. So I did a little bit of an example of this when I was linking mitigation into the context of a debate, but weighing when done right should be offensive and defensive. So it should be a form of tearing down the opposition's argument, but in a way that is in the context of your own argument, so it makes it still relevant to the rest of the debate. So weighing is comparing their outcomes to your arguments or the bigger picture of the debate. So of some things that you can weigh, there are lots of ways that these factor into the debate, and there is some overlap between these 5 things, but they are like distinct within themselves. So I'll take a while to go through one by one what each of them mean. So within the debate, the most common way you can weigh things is through utility. So I think that utilitarianism often becomes a lens through which arguments are weighed because it's quite it's very easy to understand by all judges and by all teams, and that like if a benefit is more significant than another benefit and therefore you get net benefit on your side, obviously you have to do a lot less context to explain why it's better if you get more benefits, right? Because it is just kind of intuitive. If you get more benefits, that's quite simply like a good thing. So there are lots of other ways that you can weigh debates, but this often becomes the most common one. So you want to be asking yourself, so how valuable and how useful are their outcomes? And then explaining to the judge why their outcomes are less valuable or less useful than your outcomes. The second way that you could weigh debates is by scale. So you could be comparing how many people or how deeply their side impacts people, or in contrast to how many people or how deeply your side impacts a certain group. So for example, on their side, they might impact more people, but you might impact those people, a smaller group of people on a deeper level. So this often happens in debates like about, like, for example, consumers. Like you might lower the price for more people when you're doing a certain kind of like GST tax. But here's why we should do like a targeted tax, because we should care about like a deeper impact that it will have for the smaller group of people, and that's actually better. So weighing it in that way, it becomes a little bit more specialized, but you can prove that the scale is actually more impactful on your side than it is on the other side. The third classification, as you can see here, there's a little bit of overlap, and that vulnerability could also be classified like, you could also see the overlap with the deep impact that it might have with scale. But vulnerability is also slightly different. So in this kind of weighing, you want to be talking about, are the people that you're trying to protect or benefit more vulnerable, and why then should you care about them more than the group that they describe? So in that kind of weighting, you would be talking about why the groups that your side aims to protect are more vulnerable, and therefore we should care about them more. So you're trying to get more benefits for that group, and then explaining how on their side in comparison, they have they're less protected, and because they're a vulnerable actor, you should side with your side who gets better outcomes for them. Another way that you could weigh a debate is by looking at unique capacity. So unique capacity is when you have like a unique obligation to an actor to do something, or like, could that group be better served by another group? So unique capacity could mean that you, as the actor, so often actor debates will have quite heavy weighing around unique capacity, but if you as an actor are like the best person to help this group, so for example, if it's like this, quite often, like the best example I can think of is debates about when often at joint you get this where this house is the New Zealand government, or like something about the government starting a new like health entity. This happened at Maithropi, where there was a debate about like whether the New Zealand government should establish a separate Māori health authority. Obviously, we've actually done that in real life now, so I did win that debate. So I love that I sided with reality, but unique capacity in that debate, you have to weigh up whether the government is the best actor to do it, or maybe should we instead give money to people directly, like that kind of thing. Would the government be the best actor to do that in that situation? It can happen through principle. So quite often in this same type of debate, you might be weighing up whether you have a unique obligation to serve a certain group of people. Like the Crown might have a unique obligation to serve Māori because of their obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi. So explaining why in that light, your side is able to serve this actor that you have a unique obligation to better than the other side is able to. The fifth way that you could weigh things is through a revealed preference. So this is commonly just talking about actor debates in general. So if you, in an actor debate, you're acting as someone else. It might be you as an individual, or it might be someone completely different. I'm pretty sure on the first club night, we had an actor debate about whether you as a graduate should pick a career that's boring but pays more, or pick a career that's going to be really fulfilling but pay less. So when you're in that situation, what you're going to be weighing is what that person cares about. So you're trying to argue in this way, and when you're responding to another team's points, how your side better serves that particular interest of the actor. Because, for example, the other side might get really good economic benefits, but if your actor in that debate doesn't care about economic benefits and instead only cares about, or cares more about, like benefits that they get individually or benefits that they get to their family, it's probably more likely that you're able to get ahead in that scenario if you weigh those two scenarios against each other and explain how that actor has a revealed preference for things that benefit them. So obviously that most of the time happens in actor debates. The fourth style of rebuttal or types of response that you can do is something called flipping. So flipping is actually probably quite a difficult thing to do, and definitely something that you should try to work towards at more an advanced level, but definitely be very careful when you're approaching it. So flipping is when you disprove why their point happens through direct rebuttal, or you're proving why it doesn't happen through one of the earlier responses that I talked to you about, but you take it a step further, you take it all the way to the end and explain how their argument actually works better under your side. So you're trying, if you ever hear like an advanced debater saying things like, now I'm going to co-opt all of their material, or I'm going to like flip all of their material, this is what they're doing, they're using this strategy. So for example, it looks like if their point does not work under their side for XYZ reasons, so you're just summarizing all of the direct rebuttal that you've just done. Under our side, however, we actually get the same benefits for XYZ reasons. You'd want to be careful though there, be very explicit when you're flipping material, because if you don't do it properly, you can end up accidentally making the point symmetrical. So accidentally just proving that both sides get the same benefit, which means that there's not really any point of difference between each team. So then the judge just has to sit there in the adjudication and go, what really, really small thing put one team ahead? And then it doesn't really result in a rewarding debate. So make sure that you aren't trying to get that kind of symmetrical reality. So for those of you that have never heard symmetrical in debating, symmetrical just means that it works under both sides. Like if you think of the root of the word symmetry, same thing happens on both sides. So what can become quite dangerous if you then base your whole case, or like make it your main benefit, don't make your main benefit in a debate a flipped benefit, because then you might accidentally have not done it properly, and then it's not a very good way to win. They'll probably just end up winning anyway. So you can flip things and be successful if you're explicit. So if you're very, very specific about what reasons you have proved the point for, and then why it works better under your side, then you're more able to flip things. So this isn't really a response, but another like tool in your arsenal when you're responding to other teams is there are other ways that you can call out the other team and highlight places in a debate where they've been like particularly weak. This will most likely just do things like, get you a couple extra speaker points rather than win you a debate, or it might make your team as a whole look a little bit more convincing. So 2 ways that you can call out the other team in debating is, firstly, you can point out non-responses. So this is pretty self-explanatory. Non-responses are when they haven't exactly specifically responded to really, really good parts of your case. So just make sure that you're coupling this with explicit analysis of why or what it means if they haven't specifically responded to parts of your case. So usually this means, okay, you're a second speaker, and your first speaker has previously been given a really, really well-crafted case. Their first speaker didn't respond to any of that case in their responsive portion of their speech. You would then come up and highlight that no one has responded to particularly good analysis, and this means that they're already on the back foot, or they need to do a lot of work to explain why that the benefits that you proved at first aren't true. So then that's pointing out non-responses. You can also do this later in the debate, but I think it's most effective like as a call out of early responsive speakers not doing their job. The second thing that you can do to call out the other team is highlight assertiveness. So this is also pretty self-explanatory. The first one is calling out where they've been bad in responding. This one is about calling out where they've been bad in their writing of their cases. So what you would do here is if, for example, they've written a point and it's only got like one mechanism, it's helpful to point out that they've only got one mechanism, just directly respond to that one mechanism, so disprove why that one mechanism is true, and then highlight where the rest of their point has basically just been assertion. So because you've dismantled that one mechanism that links the point together, that means that they haven't really got a case left over to keep carrying through the debate. So I would also recommend that you do this kind of thing very, very early on in the debate, or if you are like later in the debate, do it very, very early on in your speech, so that you can gain the most ground out of doing that kind of thing. Because if it's in the judge's mind earlier in your speech, they're more likely to weight it than if it's like a throwaway line, more like 6 to 8 minutes in your speech. So these are all of the types of responses that you can use, or the kind of like tools in your toolkit that you can take into a debate in the responsive portion, even as a first next speaker. Now we're going to look at some of the things that you can respond to in debates specifically. So quite simply, you can rebut literally every layer of an argument. So if we think back to last week when we went over the structure of a point, you can respond to the context of a team's case. This usually looks like, particularly lots of teams will make quite a few assumptions in their context that help their point work. So if you can respond to the assumption that their case is contingent on, then this is quite an easy way to like get over points that the other team has brought into a debate. You can also respond to the mechanisms that a team has brought. This is most commonly where debates take place. So most commonly you'll have teams arguing over whose mechanism was the smartest or whose mechanism was the most likely to happen. Usually this is where most of the responsive portion of a debate will take place. But in this portion, I'd recommend you're using all of the tools in your arsenal so that you can really get over those mechanisms. I think moving into responding to outcomes, you usually aren't actually responding to the outcome itself. You're responding to the link between the mechanism and the outcome. Because, for example, if it's a debate about like teachers and the mechanism is if we increase teachers' pay, then they're likely to like deliver excellent quality lessons. then the outcome of that is that you get like really, really smart children, and like the quality of society is going to increase exponentially. The response to that would be probably calling out that there's like a big gap between the mechanism that they brought of paying teachers more and them being happier, and then kids being really smart. Like there's quite a lot of things that happen in between there. So you'd want to call out, okay, that's probably not a very logical connection between those 2 points. So you aren't always really responding to the outcome directly. You're probably more looking at the link between the two, and that's what you're responding to. Then in terms of responding to the impact, here is where you'd probably be doing most of the mitigation work. So mitigation is where you reduce the significance or just like downplay the other team's point rather than just prove it outright. So in the impacting, when they're trying to be like, wow, our case is so amazing, it benefits the entire world, you would be like, I don't actually think that it impacts the entire world. Here's reasons why it actually only impacts this small group of people. Here's some other things that are outside of just the structure of a point that you can respond to. So as well as including assumptions in the context of individual points, there will also be a lot of assumptions within the setup of first speaker speech, especially if a team has crafted a really, really well written comprehensive case. So you want to be looking at all parts of their speech for places that you can get ahead. So for example, you'll be wanting to look at their model. So is it realistic? Is it practical? Does it even work? You want to be explaining, okay, I think it's not very practical. Here's X reasons why, like this tax is too high to be practical. Another thing that you can respond to is, what is their alternative? If they're a neg team and they probably needed to bring your alternative because you're not changing something, you're arguing for the status quo, they need to then argue for an alternative. If they haven't bought one, you should probably highlight that and highlight that that means that the debate doesn't really work very well. But if their alternative, they have brought an alternative, you could do things like respond to why their alternative it isn't better than the one that you're bringing, and obviously like many ways, or why their alternative, like their model, isn't realistic, practical, or doesn't really work. You also want to be responding to things like, what is the problem in their case addressing? Because all debates will be about a problem. So the reason that really smart adjudicators are the ones that set motions, the reasons that they set motions are to address a problem that exists. So if their case isn't really getting at that problem, isn't really changing or fixing that problem that exists, that probably means that you want to attack them there and point that out for the adjudicator. So exactly, is that the problem that the debate actually means to solve? If it isn't, then tell the judge why it isn't. Then finally, is the burden that they've set for themselves reasonable? So a burden, or another thing that you might hear it referred to is like a path to victory. So a burden is the minimum thing that a team needs to prove to win a debate. So if the burden that the other team has set for themselves, if it's really low, then you probably want to call them out for that. If they've said, we only need to do this one thing to win the debate, you need to analyze that and be like, actually, they need to do this many things to win the debate. Here's why. Because you would explain then it's the only way that they get to the solution of the problem in the debate. Obviously, most of the time, teams will strategically try and set themselves really, really low burdens, or like a very, very low minimum to win the debate. So you want to try and get that up a little bit higher so that they have a little bit more trouble getting to the winning point. So we went over earlier the types of responses that you can use in debating, and also the things that you can respond to in debating. Layering responses is how you get from like a new debater who knows how to say that things are wrong and give reasons why that's true, to a really advanced debater, because the teams that are winning Joint Scroll, the teams that are going to win like all of the New Zealand university tournaments, are going to be the ones whose responsive speakers layer their responses and really just decimate other teams' points. So what makes a strong response? You got to defeat that point on all fronts. So I would suggest that the reason that I ordered the explaining the different types of rebuttal to you in the way that I did was because I would recommend that as the way you layer your responses. So on how to defeat a point on all fronts, Firstly, you want to directly respond to it. So you want to prove why it isn't true and why their point doesn't work in the way it is. So maybe you're responding to a mechanism. Give me X, Y, Z reasons why that mechanism isn't true or why that mechanism doesn't work. Secondly, you want to mitigate that point. So here is where you get to the really advanced part of debating, where you're making lots of ground and making yourself seem like very, very smart. What you want to do is mitigate the point. So you get into a trap in debating where you feel like you can't concede when another team has a really good point. You can to an extent, but you just got to respond to it smartly. So in mitigation, you can concede to an extent, like you're kind of saying, even if adjudicator, you don't buy all of my reasons that I gave you in my direct responses, here's why, even if you believe that they're logistically still right, here's why it's not relevant in the debate. So you want to mitigate why their impacts aren't that significant, or they aren't serving the right actor in the debate, or they aren't protecting the vulnerable people that the debate is actually about. So you're kind of reasoning why the debate actually takes place in another area of the problem. The third thing that you can do is do another layer of even if. So you've said, okay, judge, here's X, Y, Z reasons why this point isn't true. Even if you don't buy those reasons and you think it is true, here's why that point isn't important. And then you can go, even if you don't think that that point is false and you think that that point is still significant or is still relevant, here's why our case is more significant than their case. So you can even layer this part of the response. You want to make sure that you're still being charitable, so you can engage A in the best case. So the best case is weighing their best, absolute best case, like they've got all the mechanisms right, they've got everything still being true, against your case. So you want to be going, okay, here's why, even if you think that their case is true and it's at their best version, it's still less significant than our case. So you want to be arguing things like, maybe your case is more accurately serving the people that are the most important, or maybe you're still getting more benefits to everyone under your side. But then you can also, when you're engaging with the worst case, you don't want to only engage with the worst case, but you can get yourself a few more speaker points if you're trying to analyze literally every layer. So you can also engage with the worst case. The worst case is the version of their case when you've mitigated it. So you've gone, okay, here is their case, here is the impact that I think it actually has. You've reduced it a little bit smaller, and then weigh that version against your case. So obviously in that event, your case is already going to be slightly ahead. So say they've said our case impacts the entire world, and then you've mitigated it to go, oh, actually, it actually only impacts the small group of people. And in the second layer, you've weighed it against your case as 3A, you've weighted against your case when it's up here. Now it's down here, it's only a small group of people, you're going to weigh it against your case, and obviously it makes your case look even smarter. The fourth thing that you can then try is flip the point altogether. So you've decimated their point on all fronts. Even if it's true, it's not that important. Even if it's still important, it's not as important as our case. You'll want to try and walk through why you can still get those benefits on your side. So you want to give X, Y, Z reasons why it's more likely that you serve the actors that point tries to serve. So at the end of all of this, you've given quite a lot of responses to their point. You want to try and summarize everything that you've said, because then it means it's more likely that the judge is able to remember or able to understand what it means now that you've gone through all of these layers of responses. Because this is especially when you start to conclusively win points, is when you summarize at the end what all of these layers mean. Usually it means that because this obviously isn't true, or even if it is true, it's less significant, your side is able to get significantly ahead over their side. If you give that summary and you are explicit to the judge, this means we're winning, then the judge is probably going to also agree with you in their head. Oh, I guess it does mean they're winning because this person has done all of the organization work in their heads for me. At the same time, so all of this big layered response was just offensive mainly. What you want to do here is after you've summarized what those responses mean, make sure that you're still rebuilding your own case. So many teams, especially in schools, especially in club nights, fall into the thought that, okay, all of the case building is just for my first speaker. At second and third, all I'm going to think about is tearing down the other team's case. You want to make sure that you still end the debate with a really good case left to stand on. So some ways that you can rebuild later in the debate. The first two are probably going to be more for second speakers. So this is in 3v3 debating, obviously. Ways that you can rebuild are firstly by adding additional mechanisms. So say at second, you were tracking your first speaker's speech and they missed a few mechanisms that you talked about in prep. You'd want to add those back in and prove why this makes your case stronger. Second thing that you could do is revise the impacts that your first speaker has given. So maybe they didn't quite get enough time in their speech to get to this part, or maybe they just forgot about it altogether. But at second, you want to be revising what the conclusion of your points mean. So maybe your first speaker did get through all of the mechanisms in their speech, but they didn't actually explain what it meant in the context of the debate. So you want to be like, as my first speaker said, this point is true for X many reasons. Here's the massive impact that it has on people and society. Or like if it's, I just like to use education examples in seminars because they're really easy because everyone went to school. Well, I assume everyone went to school if you're coming to these, is you're revising the scale of impact that it has. So for example, if you're talking about this weird teacher example that I brought into the seminar earlier, you want to be talking about how many teachers it impacts and how it's really important that we impact, make lives better for this many teachers, or we make their lives more, that we improve the quality of life, that kind of thing, so that you can really emphasize the benefits of your case that exist, because then it's more likely that the judge will appreciate the benefits that you brought. Thirdly, I think this is something that all speakers should be doing in the debate, even at first. Obviously, they haven't really responded to your case much, so it is mostly for second and third, is a basic defense of your points from their responses. So this is kind of the flip side of the coin. You'll still want to build up your own case from their responses that they've tried to take it down. So it's doing things like this, their response to our point isn't true for XYZ reasons, our point still stands, so our case still stands within the debate. Every single time that you respond to something, make sure you think about the flip side of the coin. So you'll see lots of speakers, especially at joint, if you go and watch like A1 or A2 at the tournament, they'll be doing things like, okay, so what's the comparative? The comparative is how your case still stands. So you're trying to think of everything in debating is like two sides of a coin. There's their side and your side. Don't put all of the weight on one side of the coin, because then it's probably going to be them still winning the debate. Make sure you're really building up that case or rebuilding that case that you built in prep. So that's a number of tools that you can use to respond to speeches. But I think what a lot of speakers don't realize or don't quite grasp is that how you organize your points in itself, how you structure your speech, is also a strategy. So just a note on path to victory. I know I've been getting a lot of questions from first years that are going to joint about, my judge keeps telling me that I need a better path to victory. What the heck does that mean? So here's just a little note so you have an idea going into joint or throppy if you're trialing for that. I think that's next week. So you can't win every point of clash in high level competitive debates. You can try really hard, but oftentimes there's just literally not enough time in 8 minutes to get through everything. So how you can get around this and still conclusively win debates is by thinking of the minimum you need to prove to win the debate. And then make sure that you consistently, so down the line, it's not just at first, not just at second, not just at third, everyone is trying to cater their structure, or everything they say is working towards getting to that end goal. So what it looks like in individual speeches is first, signal to the judge and structure your points around it. So you do something like within your setup, you've gone, okay, here's my introduction, done a 30-second spiel about what the problem is in the debate. Then you go, our burden in this debate, or like 3 paths to victory, things like that. If we do X, Y, Z, we win the debate. If we do X or Y or Z, we win the debate. If you clarify it first, then that judge has that mind frame or that lens looking at the entire debate. So if you are really, you're making the judge's job easier here, and that they have to do less mental gymnastics to get to your win than if the other side doesn't say that kind of thing, right? Because you've said, okay, we have to do this to win, then the judge knows what you're assessing yourself on. If the other team doesn't do that in comparison, the judge has to make it up themselves, so it's less likely to be charitable to you. So after you've said that little path to victory, or here's our burden, you want to make sure you're still structuring your points around it. So literally everything that you say in a 6 or 8 minute speech should be working towards that goal. If you have like a side point about like, the goal of the debate is to get the most benefits to the economy, but you have a side point about culture, you probably shouldn't be starting your speech with that point about culture. Leave it to the end so you can give maximum time to all of the relevant points to the debate. What it looks like at second is prioritizing responses to any of the material that gets in the way of that path to victory that you've come up with. So leave all of the other miscellaneous responses that don't really get in the way of getting to that win till the end of your speech, or till the later part of the responsive part of your speech, so that you can get through the important stuff first. I can't stress this enough. It's all about prioritization within responses. I used to do this really bad when I was in high school and lose debates because of it. At third, this point of your speech is it's in some ways similar to second speeches, but the point of your speech is to respond in a way that gets you to the finish line, because the debate's still evolving, still happening at second. At third, you've got to try and get that nail in the coffin, like really just destroy the other team's case. So you should be adapting based on the material within the debate. So the path to victory, or the way that you win the debate at third, is probably a little bit different to the way you said it at first, because of the way that you've interacted with the other team's arguments and come to a slightly different solution. So for an example, a debate on schools, you can win if you prove improvement for teachers or students. So you're setting up there 2 paths to victory. All you have to do then is like a little bit less legwork, because even if the judge doesn't believe that you get better, you get improvement for students, you still have another pathway left on teachers. So that's just like a little bit of note on how this kind of strategy should inform how you structure your speech. In terms of structuring your speech, points of clash are very useful for organizing groups of responses, because your speech really is just kind of like a summary of all of the responses that you have to the other team's arguments, and how they play into or how they factor into your own arguments. So how you identify them is, firstly, think about the problem in the debate. So I talked about that earlier. Why was this motion set? What's the core of the debate? You're trying to solve that problem. So each of your points of clash should in some way work to solve that problem. Maybe the problem in the debate is that we don't have enough teachers in schools. How are we going to get more teachers in schools? So one should be about like school culture, one should be about teacher pay, one should be about like the attitudes of students. Getting there in multiple different ways, but everything's working towards the same goal. If that makes sense, everything has to have a purpose, because you have a very, very limited amount of time to get all of your words out there. The second thing that you should do is think about what each side aims to do. So if both of you have the same aim, so in that debate, that hypothetical debate that I just talked about, both teams will probably have the same aim of getting teachers in schools, right? So that you're trying to get more teachers. So what the way up then is whether your side or their side is the better approach to do it. So when you're then identifying the points of clash, you should be looking at, okay, we have the same aim. What did we differ on when we're talking about culture? What did we differ on when we're talking about teacher pay? What do we differ on when we're talking about student approach? Because each of you will have a different solution to that problem. So you're trying to weigh it in different ways. The third way that you can do it, or third approach to it, is why is your issue more important, or what issues are more important? Obviously, here's where you can become strategic with your prioritization. So if there are these 3 points of clash on student attitude, teacher pay, and I can't remember what the other one was, but there are 3, you're clearly winning on one of those clashes. Maybe you're clearly winning on the economic stuff. You should probably front load that, right? You should probably draw that out for the judge and explain how you're winning in that area, because then it's like, why would you waste so much time on areas of the debate where you're clearly not winning? Because you could just win by proving this one thing conclusively. Fourthly, you want to be thinking about, within these points of clash, who should the judge care about more? Obviously, in some debates, you might care about the same group of people. You're just differing in your approach to benefit those people. But in other debates, you'll actually be arguing for different groups of people and who we should care about more. So you should organize your points of clash in a way that prioritize the group that you want to care about more, rather than the ones that they want to care about more, so that you can make more progress in that way. And once you've figured them out, usually it's quite obvious or quite easy to pick them out if both teams are engaging with each other properly, because both teams will have like pretty much opposite arguments, right? Like you're both arguing about like teacher pay, but you just think that the reasons for why things change are different. You should prioritize them in the way that I talked about earlier. So work through the most important material in the debate first. So even on a micro level, even in like within the groups of responses, if you had a really, really strong response, you should put that first and then save the rest for later. So if a point, for example, became irrelevant in the debate, so within a point of clash, maybe you had like a little sub point about like the currency that you pay teachers in, you should probably not be spending a lot of time on that, because you have to spend the majority of your time on the things that are going to get you towards the win. If that thing is not relevant at the responsive part of the debate, it's probably not worth wasting your time on. So I guess my overall thing would be only present an argument if it's defeating their path to victory or strengthening yours, because that's ultimately the goal. You want to win, so you want to get there by making yourself look good and making them look bad. Just another note on extending margins. So this is especially helpful for those of you who want to go to joint and like wipe the floor with Victoria teams, because I love doing that personally. Here's how to extend margins. If you prove your minimum requirement to win, anything that you prove after that is extending your margin of victory. So once you get confident in reading debates and how they are tracking, you can signal this to the judge. And it feels really powerful. And it's one of the reasons that I continue to debate. It's it's just like a drug, like how fun it is to just like to get up there. You've spent 3 minutes responding to the other team, and then you go, okay, I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes telling you why we actually won this debate by 20 points. Like, oh, so funny. What you do then is working it into your structure. You can do this within points of clash. So the first point you'll spend that time proving the minimum that you need to win, and then you can spend the next 2 walking through ways in which you got additional benefits, or you even got even more significant or even like additional things that the other team didn't get. I think just with this though, this is quite an advanced strategy. So I would do a lot of work to practice reading debates and tracking debates before you start to do these kinds of strategies, because if they're not done right, you can just come across as being very assertive. So however, though, I wouldn't stray, like I wouldn't be afraid to do it. I wouldn't be afraid to try it, because this is the difference between like a solid third speaker and like a phenomenal one that goes on to like do really amazing things in debating. So I would use this as a goal to work towards. Try and refine your debate tracking skills, trying to find your, sorry, I'm trying to read the time off my laptop, but I can't see. It's 5:50. Thank you, Aisha. It was frozen at 5:38. I didn't think it'd been 5:38 for 10 minutes. But yeah, work towards it as a goal, but plan or train yourself to track debates. I think a good way to learn how to do this is by training or by judging for different periods. So to summarize all of this, I'll just finish with some more like words of advice for using all of these skills in debating. So the first thing I would say is make sure you're being charitable. So being dismissive of another team's arguments as dumb, or saying that argument was so dumb, actually also makes you look dumb because you didn't come up with reasons why it was dumb. That's what the judge is looking for. So take your opposition's arguments or take their points at their best so that you can respond to them and make yourself look smarter in the process. Probably looks like saying things like, I think they meant this. Here's why that's still not true. The second thing I recommend is make sure you're being specific. So use examples where you can and be specific about how things happen, because this will make it more likely that the judge will believe you. There's a really big difference between being like, we think this happens for this many reasons. We also know that this happens because here's this example where it happened in the way that we say it did. That seems a lot more convincing than just giving the reasons. The third thing I would say is be comparative. So don't get stuck arguing about how things happen only on one side of the debate. So how does it work on your side too? Remember, two sides of the coin in debating, their side and your side. Don't just respond to their arguments and don't just build up your own. You got to do both in order to win the debate. And then finally, don't forget to cheerlead. That's like literally the point of being a third speaker. You can't win without a case left to stand. So you got to be like, as my first speaker said, my first speaker was really smart. You're trying to carry a case to the winning line. So make sure you're explaining how your case stands and why it's important at the same time as responding to things. So please keep it simple. Don't go overboard with all of the layering, although layering in itself can be quite simple because you're just walking through. I would say if you're keeping it simple, I was going to add stupid, but I didn't really want to be like quite aggressive about it. Just keep it simple. And I'm sure if you're a novice and you've never debated before, you've never done any kind of responding, just start with one thing. Add one thing each time you do a different debate, and you can build your skills from there. If you're going to join, if you've done debating before, you're looking on a way to improve, try and, challenge yourself to get everything together and push yourself each time you do a different debate. So just to clarify by what I mean by keep it simple, here is a fun little graph that I actually stole from Harper. So if you see Harper, tell Harper thank you. I just added in the little arrows. Within debating, points will fall literally all over this entire spectrum. So they could be important but false. They could be important but true. They could be a little bit insignificant, but they're a little bit true. The goal is you want your points to be right up in the important and true part. You got to prove it's important, and you got to prove that it's true. You want their points, or you want to be proving that their points in comparison are not only not true, but they're kind of insignificant and not really relevant. So that's kind of the takeaway that I would get on trying to make sure that debating is as simple as you can make it. So just finishing on any questions. I know that I have done a lot of talking in this seminar, so I like to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions, whether that's on the Zoom, whether that's on the live stream, or whether that's in, you want to DM me later because you have like a specific question about a specific debate. That is completely fine with me. I'll open the floor. Does anyone have any thoughts? Doesn't even have to be a question. It could just be a comment, like in general.
These slides I can be fine.
Yeah, I'll make sure they're put up either on the website or the Facebook page, and this seminar will also be available to watch later on the Facebook page. Yes.
Hey there, so what if what you say is false, right? But they don't know that. It still seems logical, right? Your arguments, right? There's that.
Then you run with it. You run with it like the wind. My favorite part of debating is lying. You just got to lie. You just got to even if in your head you know it's not true, you just got to try and make everyone else think it is. Yeah, best debaters are really good at lying. So just it's all about the confidence and the fact that it is true. I don't know if I've gotten any on the Zoom, but I assume we have not. All good. Thank you everyone for coming to the seminar. Please come and ask me literally any questions. I love talking. So also, if you don't like me and you like someone else, all of the exec members also know lots of things about debating. So you should ask them questions, or I'll point out as we get our old people walking throughout the year, or veterans, I'll point them out to you so you can ask them questions. They're even more knowledgeable than I am. So I will stop this share and I will stop the live.